Hi, Nikolai. Welcome back.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
So, what happens on your side right now? So, what are you doing?
Well, I'm doing the podcast. But otherwise, I'm preparing for holidays.
Before the podcast and after the podcast. Holidays.
Yeah, I'm going to be take a 2-week vacation on Crete coming Sunday.
This is a conference or?
No, like when you take time off work and you take the family and go away, that kind of thing. It's weird, I know, but sometimes it.
You mean if you're doing Java 19 then, or what happens then with the family, right? So you can explain to your family, one day we get Java 20 and you can expect this thing, and back to work usually is back to Java 4 or something like this, 1.4, right?
Well, we're joking, but I actually what I like to do is when I go traveling is I try to figure out whether there's a local Java user group that I could present to, and indeed there is one. So I'm actually gonna also spend an evening in Heraklion and present on the upcoming Java versions on Amber and Valhalla, Loom and Panama.
And this is what I suspected. So it was not joking actually. So was also my plan, vacations plan. But you have always to sell it right to the family, This is the
you called me out. Like it's true. Like so, but this is like actually, and also like I'm not going to stop working entirely. Look, my dream life is not working. My dream life is working a couple hours a day and then be on the beach, right? So when I go on holiday, it's my chance to live the dream life. So what I try to do is to sneak a few hours away from the family and just spend like 2 hours, lazy sitting with the laptop somewhere where it's nice and sunny and do some, some lazy pull request reviews or write a blog post. And then when I'm done working, and I'm using air quotes here, then I go to the beach because that would be amazing to do that all day, every day. So the closest I can get is to simulate that during holidays because I'm living in Karlsruhe, which is very nice, but really doesn't have a good beach.
So for me, it sounds like dream, but I think the beach is nice for half an hour and then becomes boring for me. So I would try to do something different. But if you're happy with the beach, let's see. We will meet again if we are 80, and the next podcast will be the episode, I think, 2050 or something like this. And then we can talk whether it is really a dream, to sit on the beach and do nothing.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, you don't have to do nothing, but you're right. Like, this gets boring at some point. But you can do other stuff. You can learn how to surf, and you can,
one day. So, okay, this is
reading.
But I would call it. Okay, perfect. It's true, but on the beach is too bright to read. So
man, you're already an old man.
And there, there is a wind and there is sand. So if I would like to read, is in basement is the base. Reading.
Okay, look, you should try this new thing, which is called an ebook. It's even waterproof. I can even read it's just like a meter though. So like I shouldn't actually drop it to the ocean, but you can read on the beach. Yeah. Like specifically, actually, like I'm really trying. Like back when I was still not a Kindle, but technically. So when I was still reading actual books, I was like really fond of them, and I tried them, to have them around for a long time. And that taught me not to bring them to the salt sea because the salty air dries cheap glue, and those books that are only glued, the pages will just start falling out. So you either get like expensive books, or you better not take them to the ocean. All right, at least like not even into the ocean, but just right next to it is already damaging to the books.
So what you learn right now, vacations are way too complicated, right? So everything gets damaged. You have to be careful what you are doing, So if you are working, it's just, relaxed situation. But if I have to think, which books can I take to vacations and, and what the ocean can destroy. So I think just working with Java is way better, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. That's much safer at least. Like, the Yellow Garbage collection in real life.
Safer, exactly. Oh, the ocean is the garbage collection of all pages you read with the book. But you see, this was I'm the true evangelist. It's no more called evangelist, right? So you're not evangelist anymore, right?
No.
So you are the DevRel.
Yeah.
DevRel, right?
Developer Relations Group, I think is the official name.
So then I'm a DevRelogist. And joking aside, the 2 hours. So I think if you are really focused, I think you could achieve in 2 to 3 hours an entire working day. So this was my observation. If I was, and conferences like, let's say Java 1, almost vacations back then, but I had to fly there. Or if I'm in a train, or I have the limited time, right? So if there's 2 or 3 hours focused work, you can achieve amazing things. So I would say spending 2 hours on to working and the remaining day on the beach can be actually extremely productive. This is actually what I really believe.
Yeah, you're not wrong. So I work somewhat long hours, but the main contributor to that is that I have it's challenging for me at the moment, like not at the moment, like for years now, to actually like do focused work, like as you described. So, for example, one of the things that drove productivity down during traveling was when German Bahn starting to introduce internet on their trains. Because before they had internet on the trains, I would just bring all my work offline onto my laptop, and I would just have like 3-hour train ride. I could just work for 3 hours focused. And now everything is like, I got Twitter, I got Slack, I got emails, and now it's like my productivity went down the drain. So I'm really like, I'm not good at just like sitting for 2 hours and working productively. I spend to, maybe spend some time on social media and then, like walk around the flat and prepare some more food or clean some stuff up. And like, it's not exactly that focused work. And that's like a vicious cycle, right? So what that leads to is, well, I got to get this shit done though. So I'm going to work later. And then the next day, you're not super fit either because you just worked a long day yesterday. And so, from that perspective, that's actually what you should do on vacations, is to actually not work at all, not think about work at all, to just really like recharge the batteries. So I'll see. Like I probably like we were away for 2 weeks, and there's some things I need to fix. I need to get done. So probably I want to try to get like the first week out, as I said, like just a couple of hours of work a day, not many, like 2 to 3 maybe, and then the second week, just really try to relax. But yeah, like you're right though. Like if you could work very focused, I agree 100% that you can get probably not as much as in 8 hours done, but a lot.
And I think what is work, right? So if you just back to vacations. So what I really enjoy about German vacations is like now Christmas, or now we have or we had Easter's or whatever, that most of the companies are not working. So I'm getting less emails or no emails from my clients. So, and the interesting stuff is I can ignore all the social interactions, all the social media, and just focus on coding, which I really enjoy. So, and this is almost like vacations, because I can spend 2 hours coding, something is accomplished, everything is green, and I can do something different. But in a regular working day, you get emails, you have to deal with other stuff, which is just no kidding. Maybe even if we are on vacations and we are working on a fun Java project, it could be true vacations. It could look like a work, but I mean, whether we know Wordle mapping or Sudoku, whatever, is also thinking, right? So why I cannot just write code to enjoy it, right? So I mean,
there's different aspects to work and to relaxation as well, right? So one thing you're saying there is, well, if I enjoy doing it, then to a degree that's not that much work. But and as I said, I think to a degree that's true. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that just using the same mental processes, the same part of the brain, like you're already exciting a lot during work, to the brain to a point, whether you have fun or not, like it will make a difference, definitely. But it will still be, it's like saying, hey, I'm not doing pull-ups for work, now I'm doing pull-ups for fun. Great, but you're still going to exert your muscles, right? You're still going to be tired afterwards. So I think to a degree, that still plays a role. But you're right, like I'm not going to do I'm going to shut off email for that time, so that's good. But exactly what you said, there's like a open source project that I want to do a pull request, that I want to go review pull request, a big one that's out there right now. And just like a bunch of small things, I have like small projects lying around where in the heat of the moment, like I use, so for example, when I create videos, the assets I create, I do that with a small little web-based project. And I often do like small little changes in the heat of the moment that I need for the video, but then I don't have time to properly clean them up and commit them during the same time frame because I'm busy with the video. And so a couple of changes have just like ramped up. So that's something I want to do. I just want to go through the project and clean it up a bit. And then later, like that takes probably just 2 hours. And then I feel like, hey, great, this project is now in a better state than it was before. So I often do that. Like if I do small little experiments, I have like changes lying around locally that at some point in the future I will come back to, look at the changes and then clean them up and commit them. And so that's some of the work I'm planning to do. So yeah.
Also interesting thought, right? If you're reading a book, I'm not sure whether you're using a different parts of brain than by coding. This is also to be proven, whether if you are reading a book, is this really something different than coding? This would be interesting.
Yeah, but because it's not...
Because you are using the brain.
Yeah, I mean, you're always using the brain, but you're not problem solving. Right? I mean, depends on what you read, right? But if you read fiction, you're not problem solving. You're just imagining stuff. So I'm pretty sure that would count as
Yeah,
relaxation.
it depends which fiction, right? There maybe there's a challenging fiction, challenge fiction. If you immediately start to think, about what happens here in meta and why, and then this is like problem solving again. It really depends on the book. I'm just saying. So maybe we better just to go like to a temple and meditate. Do nothing. This one will. But if as long as we try, to read something, this may be what really because. But this is a different thing, right? So we should back to vacations again and Java 18. This is where, and you already told me one sentence before the show, Java 18 is of course boring. We have Java 19, but still Java 18. So briefly covered, right? So we have the code snippets, which I really enjoy, right? This is a big deal, the code snippets.
In Javadoc, you mean?
And what is it, Nikolai? Yeah.
Yeah, and you mean
what is the proper name? Isn't the proper code snippets in Javadoc?
Yeah. No, I didn't catch the Javadoc. Yeah, so you're talking about code snippets in Javadoc, right? Yeah. So I think so.
You use them?
Well, I don't have a project at the moment that uses JDK 18, so nope. But we use something similar. So what we use is. So the basic idea is, right, you have documentation, and documentation contains examples. And I think while documentation should often, depends, you have different levels of documentation, right? Specifically, Javadoc should be concerned with, defining a contract. And for defining a contract, you don't really need, technically, examples. But they still help a lot. And the better parts of the Javadoc are those the Javadoc, for example, on the package Java util stream, which just has a long introduction to how they work. Something that is tough to explain on any individual interface is instead explained on the package doc. And that has examples, a lot of it's almost like a tutorial. It's still very formally written, but it does go into great lengths to explain all the concepts. And for that, specifically, examples are great. And also, if you have documentation for a project on the website, which is not Javadoc maybe, but you still want to have examples there. So we don't use code snippets in Javadoc at the moment, but I do use code snippets in ASCII-Doc, which is kind of similar. So the idea here is that if you have a text-based document like Javadoc or ASCII-Doc, and you just write the code snippets out there, well then, first of all, you're not sure whether they compile. But second of all, even if they do, you're not really sure whether they do what you promised they do in the surrounding documentation, right? The surrounding text. And you would think, well, that's just tough luck. You can automate documentation. But you can get some help. And what you can do in ASCII-Doc, and that's what we're doing there, which you can now also do in your Javadoc, is you can put your source code into another file and then import a section of that file into your documentation. And the great thing about that is that other file can be and should probably be a full-blown Java source file that the compiler can actually work with. So what code snippets in Javadoc allow you is to create a .java file somewhere, put your code that you want to show in your documentation into that file, have it compiled. You can actually have it tested. So this will not be a big challenge, right? What you can do is have a separate source tree. We call it, instead of source main Java and source test Java, we call it source demo Java. In there go all the source files that are just used in the documentation. And then we just, we compile those.
Question to you.
Yeah, go.
Why you are not writing a unit test with the demo functionality?
Yeah, that's the question I often get. So in the demos, you definitely can write unit tests as well, right? And you should probably write some assertions. But tests and demos have a very different audience and they change for different reasons. So that's why I would not do that. So like a demo, you write it in a way that best explains what the text before or after needs as an example, right? So you're focused on how can I make these 3 lines that I want to show, because you don't show the whole file, right? That would be too much. You just show like a couple lines. How to make those lines the best teaching lines that I can do. And then you write a bunch of stuff before and after to make it compile or to even run and assert it. Like you can actually do that. You can, no problem, you can have those demo files not only compile, but also run and have assert the correct behavior. But I would argue I would write that code differently. And specifically, if something changes, I would update it with the different requirements in mind. Whereas a test, still, of course, you want to write tests so that they that they are clearly readable and communicate well what their intention is to do, but you will do other things, like you will write code maybe a little bit terse or a little bit less terse. You will not go through all the different ways to use the same API because it would all result in the same tests, for example, right? You're looking for something else when you write tests. And that's why I think those are different requirements, and so there should be different file trees. But the demo file tree will be much smaller, right? It will just contain the stuff that you actually want to show in the documentation, which is not everything. It's much less.
No, I'm just thinking because unit test is less so, but what I always the difference maybe my project I usually like remote one microservices or something similar, right? And what happens to me is the unit tests is not the right place, but the system tests or black box tests. What happens is let's say we create a software to manage vacations, let's say, right? So and I would say create new vacations. And then I check whether the vacations are actually created. So I go to the same to another to another endpoint and ask for the vacations and see whether everything was created as expected. So then I have another test, and the another test is update vacations because I don't like to go to vacations to Greece because I would like to Greece. I would like to have a Java user group meeting, let's say. So I will have to update my vacations, right? So and if I update the vacations. Usually the another system test is create vacation, update, and read again. So what you will quickly find that the tests are repeating. So what I do, I don't know whether it's the correct way of testing, but what I tend to do is I factor out in my system test the piece of creation in a dedicated class, and then I can reuse this class in both tests. And this class sometimes then it even loses the assertions because it is like vacation creation thing and is used by creation test and by update test and by the other tests as well. And what happens over time that my system test tends to start to look like a client. So I'm refactoring the system test a lot, and I move even class from source test Java to source main Java because it's reusable, but the entire project is just for system test purposes, my microservices. Mm-hmm. And it happened to me several times. So this is why I'm asking you that actually what happened there, I wrote actually this code is directly reusable as a sample code because it has nice names, create vacations, update vacations, and could be absolutely used as a snippet.
Yeah, I still think that could work, right? At system tests, that makes much more sense, I think, than unit tests. But I still think that there's the chance that at some point you want to do something in tests, like refactoring code, right? Like factoring it out, saying, okay, every system test uses this method, there's just this like 2-3 lines. Let's just factor this out in a separate method. I think in a code snippet, that would probably not be helpful. In a code snippet, you'd probably say, no, let's keep these 3 lines in. So it's a self-contained snippet. And you don't have to be like, first we introduce this method and then later use the method everywhere, because that means each individual snippet, for example, would not be copy-pastable, right? Because the reader would have to know, up there somewhere is where the method was declared. Because we all know how this works, right? We're Googling for something, we're searching, we're landing on documentation, we scroll. This looks good. Let's try get this to work. We don't read the full article that leads up to this. So I think it would be great if examples were mostly self-contained, and that requires some repetition. And in actual test, including actual code, including test code, you want to avoid the repetition. So you work against it and try to factor code out. So I mean, it could work. And what we often do is use it as a starting place, right? So we go through our unit tests because you know what you want to demonstrate. You want to say, okay, this is how you use the annotation, and I know I use that annotation in my tests. So I scroll through the tests. Oh yeah, that looks good. That's a good piece of code. I just copy paste it over into the demo, massage it a bit. You also have to insert tags. So you have to insert the specific specific Java comments, inline comments that mark where a section begins and ends. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to pull in, as I said, the entire class or the entire method. So you have a comment that says the section foo begins here, and then later you have a comment that says the section foo ends here. And those comments would look somewhat messy in test code, but they're unavoidable in this demo code that you want to put parts out of for your documentation. So I still think it should be a separate source tree. But look, if people start using this and they pull in their test code, I'm not the police. That's fine with me. Like the more documentation there is, more well-written documentation there is, and the more of the code snippets in there are actually compiled and even tested, I'm happy with that, right? So we're basically squabbling over like the last 10% here.
Mm-hmm. So that maybe you're right. So I think the ultimate solution is going to be to have, maybe in my case, to have a demo section, so source main demo, which points to the system test actually. because in this. So maybe to explain, I don't know whether you're aware of the microprofile REST client. So what happens usually in my projects, I have a Java interface, which basically is the remote endpoint. This is in 80% of my projects. It looks like, there's annotation get or post or put or delete. There's a response, there's a JSON object coming in, and this looks almost identical to the origin endpoint with a little bit different signature, because sometimes, we need authentication, authorization, JSON web tokens, and sometimes we use responses, sometimes strings or JSON, whatever suits our needs. But this actually reflects the API one-to-one. And we could use actually demo section to present how to work with this thing, and even borrow some pieces from the system test. And not a police, it's just I thought about how to pragmatically reuse as much as possible. Because what I also tend to do, I sometimes reuse my system tests for stress tests. So I'm lazy, to write explicit tests. So the same API I'm talking about right now is also used or reused in stress tests or torture tests or whatever you call it. So I'm really interested in not repeating myself and try to reuse as much as possible. This is where the idea comes from.
Yeah. And the Javadoc snippets, they give you a few things that you can make that more viable. So for example, you can search and replace stuff based on just strings or even regular expressions. So you could say, okay, so for this code to actually work, for this test to actually work, I have to, for example, pass in an authentication token. But I don't want to show that the detail of how to do that in the demo. That's not important right now. So what you could do is you could still pull in the same snippet, and then in the place where you import, you say, okay, and please do me a favor, search and replace that string with like 3 dots with an ellipsis, right? So you said, okay, so don't go into details on the web token. I need that for the test to work. But in the actual demo, I pull that in and replace that with something simpler or something shorter. That of course quickly gets you into a lot of like string mangling, and then the question is how well maintainable is that? But there are some some hotspots where you say like, okay, this one thing I just want to just not show to the reader. It's not important. So you can replace that with something simpler. So that actually does work. So the code snippets are not just like pulling in, like copy pasting that code. You can do additional processing based on that to make sure that you can, for example, you can highlight pieces of code. You can, where you import, you can say, find everything that matches this regex and make it bold, for example. And that way you can highlight specific sections of the code too. So there's a bunch more tools, and if people are interested in this, I can recommend checking out. I think I wrote I made a newscast about this. So the Inside Java newscast on YouTube that I do. We can probably put that to the show notes. Yeah, I don't know which episode it is at the moment.
This is sounds like this feature was developed by JDK developers, right?
Yeah. So the Javadoc says the JEP says that it's not a goal of the JEP to replace all code snippets that already exist, because that would be a lot of work. But I really hope that the future will be that new code snippets in the JDK will always be created as a separate source file and then just pulled in, because I just think it makes more sense. It makes everything more easily maintainable. Yeah. Although that argument applies a little less to the JDK because it is very stable, right? So like it's the issue with writing examples that then fail later is because your API changed, and the API of the JDK changes very rarely. So I think they have actually less of an incentive to use it than everyday projects, because our projects are much more volatile than the JDK API.
But the processing could be interesting for internationalization, right? So you could have a different snippets depending on language, for instance. You could do this.
Not sure that's supported.
But it could be, right?
I don't think there's any language support.
No, it's not. It's not. But if I'm able to process the snippet, so I could process differently to different audiences, for instance, right? In theory, I wouldn't do this, so I'm happy.
Yeah, but like your Javadoc is just written in one language, right?
Yes, but the
so whatever language your Javadoc is in, like
this is true. But the API is English usually. But this we are talking about examples now.
Yeah.
And the examples can be language specific. So we could use, the John or Johann or something like this, right? Hans or John.
Okay.
John Duke or Hans Duke on Hans.
But but you just like, yeah. But again, like I don't think like that. I don't think that will work, right? Because like you can just generate one Javadoc. So or is there a way to create Javadoc in different languages? You would usually you run a Javadoc tool and it creates one set of documentation, right? So already on that level, like already the natural text that you wrote before and after
Nothing
the
will prevent
example
me
that
to-
already is all in one language.
But I could rerun the Java doc multiple times, right? So I mean, who cares? So I mean, this is technically doable. So I could generate one Java run with different settings, for instance. Why not? Should actually work, man. Java doc is a Java process. You don't think so? From technical
Yeah,
perspective.
but like, where do you write? Like, let's say you want, but let's say you have, okay, so let's say I have a class and I want documented in English and in German. How though? I would write like the Java doc first in English and then in German, and then I have to somehow tell the Java doc to throw away half the content
We
for
are
the
talking
English
about-
version and the other half for the German version.
What the idea was, what you told me, that you can replace parts, or you have the ellipsis and replace this part with something different. So just the replacement. So I could replace, just replace the variable part depending on language, for instance, right? And this should work.
Okay.
Even if it's, I mean, this is at the end of the day, is Java, and Javadoc is Java. So even if you put system properties, whatever, we should be able to react to it, right? No.
I don't quite see it, I gotta admit. But you know what? You proved me wrong. So you come up with an example on that, and
I'm probably wrong, right? This was just you told me that you can actually replace part of the thing, and my immediate idea, okay, where it could be useful, and as okay, maybe we have a different on depending on context. I could put different. So my first idea, as you thought about this, was we could actually generate. If you have one example, you can say, okay, now you have one insert statement, and we can create 5, right? So it looks like it's boring, it's not really useful. But if you will replace, the content with something context specific, and my idea was, what is context specific? Language, and this was just my idea, right? So this was not like I have a use case; it's just my immediate reaction to this, what you said, what happened, and then I asked, this is not like a requirement or just an idea what you could do. And in most projects, I'm happy that we have Javadoc at all. So I'm for sure
yes,
I wouldn't do this in my projects. It was just understanding. Okay, but I'm still
maintain documentation is already tough. Yeah,
mm-hmm. And I'm already happy. I'm surprised how many features are there in the snippets. Really, so it's like this is like in Urbi. The history behind this? How they came?
I don't know anything beyond the JEP.
Okay, because this would be interesting to invite someone from the JEP, and talk about how they came up with the feature, because it seems like someone had a problem, and they came up with solution, and this is like well thought, JEP. So it would be this is JEP 4.13, and the author is Pavel Rapo is the owner, and authors are Jonathan Gibbons and Pavel Rapo. So it would be actually interesting to talk with these guys. Why they had the problem, right? Because it's so interesting. This is actually a job for a DevRel, I would say, on vacations. It's a vacation job, something like this, right?
So I just looked it up, by the way. It was Inside Java Newscast 20, where I covered the JEP. So I'm not sure how this JEP exactly came to be, but what usually happens is somebody has an idea, as you say, somebody has a problem and thinks they're looking for a solution. But then they're also doing research, right? So what I would expect is, okay, starting from the idea that we want to have compilable code snippets, how do we get there? And then, of course, like the idea is it's very easy to say, well, it would probably be easiest if you just have a separate source file and just pull stuff in. You could come up with other solutions, right? You could think, like, no. Let's somehow identify code tags in Javadoc, and let's throw those at the compiler. But that won't work because you don't have full compilable code in there, right? So I think pretty sure that the idea was quick to be like, okay, let's put this in the source files and then just pull code out from those into the Javadoc. I'm pretty sure that then based on that, there's probably going to be some research. Like, okay, so what do we do? What do we want to do with these snippets? And then like, okay, for example, you want to replace stuff that you don't want to show because it's incidental complexity. It's not part of the teaching that you're doing. Or you want to highlight something, right? You want to make something bold or otherwise highlighted to tell this is the important part. So I would guess that starting from the point we would like to have compilable code snippets, what covers much of the use cases that we have based on that? And I would expect that research to have ended in, okay, what we need is this. So for example, there's more stuff, right? So one specific thing that's very interesting is it's called sort of hybrid snippets. So far I've just talked about pulling code in from an actual source file, which I think is the major use case of this. But you don't have to. Like, you also have it easier now to write code in line in your code snippet. That also became easier. But the interesting thing is, when you read the actual Java doc, like not the source file, I mean, not the on the website that's generated from that, but read the actual source file of a class, you actually like to see, oh, this is the code example here. You don't want to just have a reference to another file that then you have to open and go look at that. So actually, for the user, or rather for the reader of the source Java doc, it's a bit more cumbersome if every example is somewhere else. So there's this thing called hybrid snippets where you use both facilities at once, where you write the code into the Java doc, but also reference an external file. You can see the code in line, but the Java, like when you read the source again, but the Java doc tool, when generating the page, will also pull in the code from the external file and will compare them. And if they're not identical, will throw an error. So the idea behind this is you have your snippets in the source, in the Java doc source, so you can easily read it if you read the source, but you basically have that compilable file as a backup. That compilable file will be compiled, and if the API changes and it doesn't compile it anymore, you get a compile error. If you then change the external file, you get a Java doc error because you didn't update your internal snippet. I'm not sure whether that's how important that really is.
Yeah, but this is what you're talking about was actually my idea. So the internal snippet would be my client interface, which is like it is the API, and the code around could be an inline snippet because I show how to work with it. But if the API changes, it will.
Yeah, but the snippet that you write into your Java doc source and the part that you pull in from the external file has to be the same letter by letter.
Oh,
that's okay. What the snippet is. The idea with the snippet is you repeat this intentionally. So you intentionally repeat it, so it's easier to read if you read the Java doc source because you don't have to manually look up an external file. But you have the external file that is compiled. I'm not 100% convinced how useful this is because like it just seems like more work for the marginal benefit of the being able to read the Java doc source like in the text file, which I don't think is that terribly important, specifically because the many IDEs will probably soon be able to resolve that import. And so if you look at the code in your IDE, it will probably be able to do the actual embedding. And then the only issue is basically pull requests, where it would still be nice to see how maybe what example changed where, but I'm not sure whether that's worth all the effort. But as you said, like that was basically a reply to somebody had a problem and looked at this closely. I agree. Like there was somebody who had like very specific set of requirements that were that were here implemented, and I guess that they came to be like just from research. Like what do we actually need to write good documentation? But in many of these JEPs follow roughly like, I don't know, not sure whether it's 80-20 or 90-10, but they're trying to say, okay, let's not shoot for a 100% solution. Let's just get something that's pretty good and usable. And if we just need one more additional feature in this, then we can add this later, right? Because this would be adding features to this import wouldn't be terribly complicated. So I'm sure there are still use cases that are not fulfilled at the moment.
And is it possible that the in the inline snippet, the code around references a code which is pulled from the external source and is compiled together? This would be also useful. This is what I know, because you could write the demo code in the snippet and it would be compiled together with the code which is pulled from the API.
Yeah, so you're basically saying like I put like have a frame and then I have the content basically, and I want to put those together. No, that doesn't work.
Okay.
That would be interesting though, right? I think that would be a different approach to trying, because then, as you say, then you can have the example code like right there in the Java doc source.
Yeah.
And then just say, for this to work, put it into that place, into that other file. That would actually be interesting. I'm wondering, they probably considered that. But yeah, I'm wondering why. That sounds very helpful. I agree.
Yeah, but this is like this would be my hybrid snippet 2.0, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So back to you with the ASCII doc. Why are you using ASCII doc in the Markdown? Because ASCII doc is more powerful, or
yeah. So for I'm not sure. There are many Markdown. Markdown is not actually like a standardized format, right? There's Markdown flavors and everything. So maybe some flavor like support importing, but usually Markdown doesn't. Markdown is just like one file is one thing kind of thing. And ASCII doc is not like that at all. It has more of a larger scope. It's not just one file is going to be one document. It's more like, well, you probably have a larger thing to document, a larger project, and so it gives you more tools. And one of them is that you can more easily import stuff. So it's much easier to have to have one page, maybe you have like a very long page that's just made up of importing of other ASCII-Doc pages. And that's something that also includes importing source code, which also, to my understanding, does not work with Markdown at all. If you have an inline example, you have to put it inline right there. But with ASCII-Doc, you can import text from other files. And that's one of the reasons, but not the only reason. Like generally, Markdown is ASCII-Doc is a little bit more refined. Like you have this what's called admonitions. So you just write, for example, warning in all caps, colon, and then you write something. And whether you turn that into PDF or an HTML document, they all understand, oh, there's a warning. So they all have like some special casing. So for example, on a PDF document, I think you get like the warning sign, the exclamation point. And then a vertical line, and then to the right of that, somewhat indented, you get the actual text, right? So they would make a call out, oh, this is a warning, or this is, there's more stuff, like a note, I think, exists, it's like the information I. And then also on the HTML renderers, they also have this. Yeah, go.
I have discussion with my clients because they use Markdown and I use ASCII-Doc, and then I did some research, and it turned out that the ASCII-Doc is very compatible with Markdown. But in my cases, I use ASCII-Doc mostly because the tables were way better than in Markdown. In Markdown, the tables were not specified, and in ASCII they were. And as you said, I was able to generate PDF and HTML back then from one source. And what tooling are you using for ASCII-Doc?
Let me think. So we're using this on the JNet Pioneer project, and that is a Jekyll-based website. So we're probably using some ASCII-Doctor gem, but I'm privately also using ASCII-Doctor for my presentations, and for that I use Reveal.js, and they use the JavaScript backend for ASCII-Doc. So there's that, and so yeah, and my blog sadly doesn't use ASCII-Doc. I really wanted to, like when I started out, but I also need to manipulate HTML, the HTML tree for a variety of reasons. And that was much easier with the Markdown plugin. So the Markdown plugin for Gatsby, which I'm using for websites specifically, or generally the Markdown rendering and parsing packages on NPM that exist seem to be, and that was like, maybe I'm wrong here. So first of all, that could have changed, but also I might have just misunderstood. But my understanding was like it was easier for me to get access to the syntax tree of the parsed Markdown than to the syntax tree of the parsed ASCII-Doc. And because I needed that, I with a heavy heart decided to use Markdown then. Because I like ASCII-Doc a lot, actually. I like the project as well. So it was a big shout out to Dan Allen and his team who are working on ASCII-Doctor, which is, I think, the main driver in that space. You like ASCII-Doc is the document format, and ASCII-Doctor is like much of the implementation around that. So if you're using ASCII-Doc at all, you're very likely using some code that Dan Allen wrote. And he has a page on Open Collective where you can support the project, financially support the project, I mean. And that would be really great if people did that. Because as to my understanding, the project is struggling a bit, but it's huge. Like, it's very, very big. It would be sad to see it go under for worldly
and then
reasons.
it's Mojave Linux on Twitter. Great guy.
Exactly,
And he was also contributed a lot to CDI. He worked a lot with context dependency injection, and then he started the ASCII-Doctor. He was at Red Hat, so created JBoss, Whitefly, and CDI, the dependency injection, and then he started with the ASCII-Doctor project, which is really good.
Yeah.
Okay, we covered the snippets, which is not bad actually for us in a podcast episode. But there are a lot more to this, right? So in Java 18, I think from the features perspective, we are not done yet. So we had, of course, the simple web server, right? So sounds to be is also useful.
Yeah. So the simple web server, I'll tell the joke later why I laughed. I'm going to explain it. Trust me, I'm not just manically laughing to the mic. So the idea is that Java is a great enterprise language, but it's a little bit lacking when it comes to just like trying simple things out. And you've seen a push into that direction over the recent years. JShell was one part of that. The single source file execution is another part of that. And the simple web server is also part of that. The simple web server is, as it says, it's just a simple web server. You're not going to use that in production. You really shouldn't use it in production. All it does is a static hosting of a couple of files, like in directory. It's the easiest. But you have an API as well. And with the API, you can do a little bit fancier stuff. For example, there was an article by Julia Bös who explained how to use it to host the contents of a zip file, which I thought was like an interesting demo. But what you would usually use it for is with the command line, the new binary that is in the bin directory of the JDK that you download, which is called jwebserver. And I had to laugh earlier because I always start with writing jwebstart. I don't know why. I didn't even do a lot of web start, but I got so many horror stories of web start told to me that whenever I think of Java and web, and then just start comes out. I don't know what that is. So for a bunch of times when I want to launch jwebserver, I actually type jwebstart and enter, and then operating system is like, nope, that's not a thing. I'm like, why is that not a thing? Oh, right, it's jwebserver. So if you go with jwebserver, you go into directory, you type out jwebserver, and we'll host that directory on, I think, 8000, port 8000, that is. And you just use it for demos, for tests, for just very simple things, just to get something up and running a little bit quicker. And so it's a very welcome addition. So for example, when I present, as I said earlier, my presentations are written with AsciiDoc and then they are turned into Reveal.js, which is a web technology. So my presentations are basically websites. But I need to run a server in the directory. So now, in the past, I used to use an npm package for that. But now I can proudly use jwebstart. No, jwebserver. See, there it goes. So I had to, like, when I present my slides, I go to... Exactly. I am just going to print
jwebstart server is the proper name. Exactly.
So I go to...
The
JWeb
server is, I do also some JavaScript work, and actually I use browser sync and other tooling just, to have a web server which pushes the contents to the browser. JWeb server would be a great start. The only thing which is lacking is if something changes on the disk to notify the browser. So I already thought about doing this because I could see if the file changes on disk, which means I edited the file. Then the browser, there is Chrome Dev tools protocol, so I could use Socket or whatever to notify Chrome reload please the page, and then we would have a nice clean Java solution. This is a killer use case for JWeb server, right?
So you're right. That would be actually pretty neat. I gotta say, the way I work around that, like with the slides, for example, and even the npm package I used to use wouldn't detect that. So I have a browser plugin that just pings the server every second. So when I change for static files, it takes at most a second for the change to show up. But yeah, I agree, it's not ideal. It also means that you have to close or at least put into the background the terminal that runs the server, because like it gets flooded with messages, right? Because every second the browser is like, hey, let me load the page. Oh, nothing changes. I won't update. So yeah, I agree though. That would be kind of neat. I don't know how exactly that works. I think there's no standardized way to do that, is there? Like with Chrome and Firefox and Opera. Is there a standardized way for the server to trigger a reload?
No, but what usually happens is they have a small piece in the HTML which listens to WebSocket changes, and the server pushes via WebSockets. You could use SSE or whatever to notify the browser about the changes. So there is WebSockets or SSE. There is a JavaScript client, so there's like a two-liner, and it causes the browser reload. I think so. Brute force would be, you could actually say window reload or something, so you can reload the actual browser automatically. And the browser sync and the other tools are a little bit more intelligent, so they are able to replace individual files.
Yeah. So what I do as I said, my website, I wrote that in Gatsby, and I terribly enjoy that Gatsby just does that all on the fly, right? So that's basically React, and in React everything is supposed to have a key. So every piece of your HTML is uniquely identifiable. At least, within the React app. And that means like if you change anything really, like it doesn't matter what you change, as long as not the overall config, you change it, and then the running Gatsby system will detect the file change, will do the recompilations or whatever it needs to do, like pull in the new CSS or reparse the markdown, whatever. It does all of that, and then just tells the running React app, which you run, during development, to say, look, this piece changed, this HTML element changed, and then it just gets updated, and that is super, super fast. That is like, as I said, like the 1 second manual reload I use. You can see a noticeable difference between saving the file and then it showing up. It takes, at most a second, and you can notice that. With Gatsby, it's super, super fast because it just like it immediately updates the one element that changed. And that is enjoyable. Like, it's a difference, actually. It's weird, but it's a difference whether it takes a second or it takes basically no noticeable time. So yeah. So I agree. That would be neat.
A big one in JDK 18 is that finalizers are deprecated for removal, which is a bigger thing than just deprecation. We
Yep.
had already a conversation with Stuart Marks about that, and the conversation was that the finalizers were introduced at the beginning of Java because at the beginning it was almost impossible to have a nice cleanup. But with resources, there was a solution to this, and now the finalization or finalizer is just causing trouble without a true benefit. This is my understanding. What happens, right? So I assume in JDK 19 there are no more finalizers, right?
No. Not that fast. No, don't worry. So I really think that the JDK team is taking a really balanced approach to this. So on the one hand, identifying things that are not helping, or rather that are actually harming. I think that the threshold for things to get kicked out is quite high, and it should be high. Because even something like finalization, which has basically where there's no good reason to use it for at least a decade, is still being used, and phasing that out takes a while. So I really think that it's important not just go with a shotgun through the code base and kill everything that's not entirely helpful anymore. Even though there's still classes like vector. I'm not talking about the vector API, like the old school vector thing, and hashtable or hash table. Those are still there, and you could argue they shouldn't be. But pulling them out will cause a lot of pain for not so much of a benefit. Yes, they are pointless, but they're also not actively harming. But some things are actively harming, and finalization, for example, causes more complexity and more memory consumption. Garbage collectors, for example, and also lends itself to just making mistakes, to writing code that is worse to maintain and worse to debug, and that has worse performance. And that's not great, right? So if you're using vector, the damage you're doing is very local. Again, not the new vector, the old one. If you're using vector, the damage that you're doing is very local, and it doesn't matter a whole lot. But if you're using finalization in your app, you do pay an overall price. And you also gain some less stability. So I think it's really important to identify those cases where there's actually harm being done, and then pulling those teeth out slowly. You know what they say about the Band-Aid, right? Peel it off slowly over a period of years. That's the way to do it with minimal pain. I think that's how the saying goes. Anyway, so that's what we're doing here. So I don't have any timeline. I'm not aware of any timeline, but it's not in 19. I can tell you that much. There's not even a JAP draft for that. And I would be surprised, personally, this is no inside knowledge, it's just my personal opinion, I would be surprised if it would be removed before, I don't know, next year. So I'm sure, I think actual removal, I don't think it's going to happen before 2024.
It'll be interesting before whether the next LTS. What is the next LTS? 21?
That depends a bit. The proposal is 21, and I'm not sure whether the vendors already agree. Technically, every vendor can do their own thing, right? So LTS is not something that exists technically within the OpenJDK. So within the OpenJDK project and community, I mean. So OpenJDK just deals with the code base and with releases and all of that. But which company supports which release for how long, that's basically on top of that, and technically outside of the scope of OpenJDK. But at the same time, it does make sense for the big vendors to agree on certain releases, because it just makes everybody's life easier. And to the best of my understanding, only Red Hat had some qualms with the change to 21. But I'm not sure how that conversation really ended. It felt to me like Mark proposed this a while ago, and then a bunch of companies said, yes, good idea. And then after a while, Red Hat said, we're not so sure yet. And to my understanding, that's the end of that's how far the conversation has proceeded at this point. I'm not sure whether more decisions were made. And I gotta ask, actually, I'm pretty sure that Oracle will long-term support 21. And my guess is that so will many other companies, but I don't know. You should ask those other companies. Even I can't even give you a definitive answer for Oracle because I haven't asked recently. But for other companies, they would have to answer that. But probably it's going to be 21, yeah.
So the company meetings become more and more efficient, right? So Oracle says 21 and Red Hat says we are not sure and done, right? This is like a one-liner. This is a very... back then, there were no huge meetings, multi-hours, and now, 5 minutes meeting done, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how this goes. Look, the thing is, in many of these processes, I'm just an outside observer, and I prefer to stay like that, because it's like getting into the weeds of this is complicated, but it would also mean that if I get tons of background information that then I can't share, that sucks. I want to share stuff. I want to talk about stuff. So there are many places where I intentionally don't ask for background information. So for example, I never ask somebody okay, so in what version will you think you will make? Like, for example, I could ask Brian behind closed doors, Brian, when do you think will value times be there? The reason why I don't ask is, like, either he gives me like the canned reply when it's done, which he probably should. But if he's foolish enough to give me like actual inside information when I'm gonna sit on it, that's not what I do. I share stuff. That's what I'm there for. That's what I like to do. That's why they hired me, because I can't stop talking. So I don't want to have inside information, because then I have to shut up about it. So that's why but much of that is I don't involve myself in. So I really don't know what the process is, but I would expect it's more complicated than those one-liners suggest.
Yeah. So we have 3-liners, so dear, I don't know, committers, we are not sure. No. Best.
Red Hat published a blog post about that. Okay. That was a post. Yeah.
I just kidding. So we have what's interesting in 18, the Internet Address Resolution SPI. Why it's interesting, because my understanding is it was blocking and they would like to prepare for Loom, right? So it seems like what is Internet Address Resolution is what it says. And it can block for a longer time, which would be bad for Loom, right? That's my understanding.
Yeah, so Internet Resolution, it's about IP addresses, right? So you write a host, you need to IP address back. How do you do that? Well, on Linux systems, you often look for the host files, and so that part I know. Now comes my personal not speculation, but that's not safe knowledge anymore, secure knowledge anymore. So I think it's because accessing those host files is actually blocking, because that's a problem at the moment. Most file operations will block a Loom carrier thread, just because there is no other implementation available in OpenJDK at the moment. And so my assumption is that that is why resolving a host to an IP address is also a host name to an IP address. Well, that is also blocking. And so the SPI says they basically just pushed in a layer of abstraction, but didn't provide an additional implementation yet. So the original implementation is still in place, but you can provide your own. And that's actually very interesting, because it's not that hard. The cool thing about this SPI is that it gives you the original resolver. So what you can do is you can just selectively do your own thing. That is pretty cool. I'm thinking about writing a test extension for that, because what you could do is you could have an annotation in your test that says resolve this hostname to that IP address for whatever reason. And what you could do then is you plug in a custom resolution, a custom resolver that gets the old resolver, and all it does is it forwards everything to the original resolver, right? Except for that one hostname. That one hostname replaces with its own API, and that should actually work. I'm not sure whether that makes sense, but it would work.
it makes absolute sense. Very useful. What I said is because you could, for instance, in CI/CD pipelines, you can use different hosts in production, for instance, right? So we use
that's what I figured.
Different means for that. So we use microprofile configuration and override the system properties with that. But I absolutely see, partial for debugging purposes, whatever, that I can just temporarily replace the host name, right?
Yeah. So I would guess that in well-factored apps, you probably don't need this, like, hooking into the lowest level. You probably have easier access via configurations to, like, what host you want to resolve to. I was mainly thinking about, like, more older legacy APIs where actually somebody just hard-coded, like, I don't know, like a domain name or like a public static final feed that you can't just easily change.
Domain is a good one. So currently we rely on domain name in my project. So we have to use the domain name because we use it for internal purposes. But locally, I would like to, if someone points to the domain name, maybe I would like to use to redirect to localhost, right? This would be
for a mock. That's true.
Yeah. And this is very
so if I get around to writing that extension, the other problem is that Pioneer does not base against JDK 11. Against 18. At the moment, it baselines against 8. We're going to move to 11 later this year, and it's a little bit challenging. You can, but it's a little bit challenging to write code that only compiles on 18 and pull that into a JDK 11 jar. Once again, it works, but it's So I'm.
So you're doing some retro programming right now with Java 8, right?
So the funny thing is that it's a small hobby project, and most of our maintainers are currently on 11. Like in real life, the actual projects that they're paid for working on, they're on 11. So we thought about, if we leave 8, we might just as well go to 17. And that makes sense, but then we lose like 4/5 of our maintainer base can suddenly no longer use the project. And I think I mean, that's like for a hobby project, that's that's not a winning proposal. Like, okay, you know what? Let's change something about the project that 80% of our maintainers will not be able to use it anymore. I'm sure they will be thrilled to keep investing their time into a project they can't use. So we're going to version 2.0, probably later this year. We're going to go to 11. And then I hope that next year we're going to go to 17. But either way,
you change the strategy. What you could do, you could go to Java 18 and 19. Then all the maintainers cannot keep up. You can, perform your changes as you like them. So you really complete refactoring of the entire projects. And then if they get Java 18 and 19, this is then will keep up and support you. This is how good open source projects are working, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the funny thing is I can already do whatever I want. So because I'm the original creator of the project, and they were like, so that's actually an interesting side topic that, you know what, I'm just going to leave it at that because I want to talk more about 18 and 19 and we're going to meet again to talk about Pioneer. But just as a teaser, we call me, and it's not just me, the benevolent dictator. So that's my official title in that project. And we can come back to that in a future episode.
Yeah, as I met you the first time, this was exactly my, opinion about you. A small dictator, right? So
Wait, but I said benevolent. That's much nicer than just a small dictator. A small dictator is still a dick.
Yeah, but there were connection problems with the benevolent, I said, okay.
Okay.
But for open source, benevolent dictator is actually the right thing to do if someone has a vision, because if this is completely democratic, it's just harder, to implement the vision. Then that there is no clear design or strategy. But we can talk the next time about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, what's interesting, super useful, I wait for this, but still preview, pattern matching for Switch. So this is like the bigger matching, right? So what happens is the combination of this, I don't know how to call it, the matching which we already have, like, where you can, the instance of matching, I think it's called, right? And this will be the combination of instance of matching and switches, right?
Yeah, so at the moment you can use like standardized, standardized and finalized.
The matching, so what do we have?
Yeah, so those are just generally patterns, right? So at the moment we only have, let me start a little bit earlier. The issue is that these are larger topics which have like different, they have like global terms that describe like a concept, and then they have specific implementations. And for many of those, we just have one at the moment, which makes it harder to distinguish. So for example, if we talk about something that's features that are finalized, we only have type patterns at the moment. A type pattern checks whether an instance is of a specific type, and if it is, it declares a new variable of that type, which then points at the old instance, right? So that's that's the only pattern we have at the moment. Now in
how this is called, this pattern? This is
called a type pattern.
Type pattern, okay.
Yeah. And the only place where you can use it is in an if. And in an if you write if foo instance of point P, for example. So we only have this one kind of pattern, and we can only use it in one place. And what now in JDK 18, what the second preview just talked about, is pattern matching for switch, meaning, okay, now let's expand switch so that it can also use patterns. So that you would write switch over the instance foo. So switch in parentheses foo, curly braces, and then you don't write case a string, maybe because foo is a string. No, now foo can be an object, and you can write case point P, for example. But this is not just type patterns in switch. If we already had more patterns, they would also automatically start working in switch. So switch will not have to be extended piece by piece for each pattern. So the idea is switch now learns how patterns in general work. That's one dimension, that's one axis. And the other axis is let's add new kinds of patterns in the future. And so this second preview, this JET 420, was about figuring out how that works. And it's also not the final version. So that changed again for a third preview in JDK 19. And once again, there was a newscast I did about that. That was episode 24. So it was like a month ago at the time of recording, at least, where where I looked at the changes from the proposal in JDK 18 versus in JDK 19. And the interesting bit there is that you don't only want to say switch over foo, case it's a point P, do whatever. No, you also want to apply checks. You want to say, I only want to treat points, let's say where the x coordinate is 0. So what you could of course do is you could say switch over foo, and in case it's a point, so case point p arrow if x is 0. But that muddies the water. Then you have on the left hand side you have a part of a check, namely is it a point, and on the right hand side you have another part of this check, is it a point with the x coordinate 0, and then also the action on the right hand side. I think the preferable way to write this is to put all the checks on the left hand side and then all the execution on the right hand side. And to do that, you need some kind of Boolean mechanism, right? So you want to say case point p, so in case foo is a point, and then somehow also want to check that x is larger 0. And the way you did this, way that you can do this in the preview in JDK 18 is you write case point p ampersand ampersand, the ones that we use in an if check, right? So the ands. P dot x is larger 0. And that is the most important change from JDK 18 to 19 in this preview for pattern matching. In 19 you would write when. So you would write case point p when x is larger 0. Yeah, well, it's a contextual keyword, so your variables can still be called when. But yeah, indeed.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time for how long?
No, sealed. Sealed.
Sealed, exactly. Sealed. Okay, not that.
And non-sealed. Non-sealed was actually non-sealed was the first hyphenated keyword. Mm-hmm. Also, still not keyword. So the interesting thing is like technically a keyword is something that you cannot use as a variable, right? It's like void and public. Those are keywords.
Yeah. Name keywords.
All the new stuff that Java introduces are like contextual. Like var is not a keyword. Var is a reserved type name. That means var only has any specific meaning where the compiler would expect a type name. Everywhere else you can use it. So you can have a variable called var, a method called var. All of that works fine. You can even have a type that's called var if it's uppercase v. But lowercase v,
this
that
would be cool.
does not work.
So I should write a blog post. Var equals new var, right?
Yeah, totally. Definitely. Yeah. That makes for the best code.
I will, and method var. And I will do it for sure, right? This will be fun. And then var.var, and then it returns another var. So
you could write like what? Public var.
Yeah.
And then no parameters, because parameters you have to give types. That would be boring. And then you write var equals new var. And then you return var.
Yeah, and of course we need, in this particular case, a var builder, which...
yes. True.
And but this would be fun. So, okay, but how to call the when? It is not keyword. How to call this thing? So, which is a reserved word?
Yeah, so var is a reserved type name that highlights that it's only important where the type is expected. I think generally they are called contextual keywords or context-specific keywords or context-sensitive keywords. So it's about like they are a keyword in a specific situation.
Okay.
Only then do they have special meaning.
So what we learned right now is that for the pattern matching, we need some kind of Boolean expression. And the first one was the if, and the second one is going to be switch. And in the 18 we have ampersand, and in 19 we get when, right? This is what.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Interesting. Oh, interesting, useful. I'm really looking forward for the switch because it will affect me a lot. I do a lot of type checking and JSON and processing. And JSON is if you get the JSON value back, you have to know whether this is no number or string. And this will be going to be a lot nicer with the new pattern switching in. Pattern matching in switches, and what I already enjoy is the switch expressions, I have to say. So I really enjoy it. So I rewrote all the switches, and it is way nicer, way shorter, and looks good. So a small thing in Java 18, which I really enjoy, is because I always ignore that, is the default UTF-8. So I always was too lazy to do the default character set and catch the whatever. So it seems like if you don't do it in Java 8, so if I migrate my old code to Java 18, everything is getting to be better, right?
No. No. Actually, no. That depends on what your system is doing. So here's the thing. As you say, all the APIs that like read characters from files or write characters to files, they need to know the encoding, right? Yeah. And so all of these APIs have overloads where you can say this is this encoding, this is that encoding. Yeah. But as you say, we're all lazy, so we don't always do it. And the consequence of that is that then the JVM has to deduct what kind of encoding is supposed to be used, and it does not do that based on the file. It just like generally infers it from like operating system and JVM settings. So basically, when the JVM launches, it figures out what's the default encoding. And if you don't give it a specific encoding, it will use that default encoding. Now, on most Unix-based operating systems, that will be UTF-8. I mean, It doesn't have to, technically, but like you have to really struggle not to make it UTF-8. So on most of these systems, that will already be UTF-8. So most of these systems, specifically most backend systems that are Linux-based, they will not feel any change here. Every project that diligently passes encodings around, because they know that the users, create files in different encodings, they also won't see a change. The only projects that will see a change are those that do rely on the default encoding, but which are not running on a system which uses UTF-8 by default. So most likely Windows systems. So if you're running on a Windows system and you don't pass encodings around, in the past, the runtime would just pick a Windows system encoding as probably, it would have picked that as a default. And if the files are in the same encoding, that worked. But if you now move to 18, that default behavior changes, but that means that now your app might use the wrong encoding. And so the reason why this change was made is to screw over all the Windows user because they deserve it. No, wait. Yeah. Oh, that was internal. Sorry. No. The real reason is that this makes
to force Windows users to use the Linux subsystem, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And then Oracle Cloud. Go to OCI. Yeah. No, seriously. So the reason is that this makes the JVM more predictable. Like it's weird that it would behave in that perspective different on different operating systems. Because while it to a degree makes sense, it would let's say you ship with a file, you ship your jar with a file, right? Some configuration file. And that file has just one encoding, right? So you would write that file in, let's say in Unicode encoding, UTF-8 encoding, and it works and everything's fine. But then you run the same app on a Windows machine, and suddenly it figures out, oh, this is a Windows encoding, and then it cannot read that file properly, which is weird. So it makes sense for the JVM to unify, and we're always using one encoding, and gladly it's not a Windows encoding, but it's UTF-8. But yeah, that means that some code bases might have to update, but there is a command line option, let me look it up, where you can file encoding, right. So there's a system property called file.encoding. And you cannot just pick in random encoding. So what you cannot do is you cannot say like file.encoding equals whatever you want. That never worked, actually. But you can now set that to compat. So like compatibility in all caps, COMPAT. And then you will get the old behavior back. So if your app starts behaving weirdly on JDK 18 with regards to characters, then you're probably on a system that doesn't use UTF-8 by default, and you probably don't pass enough encodings around. And the quick fix is to set the file encoding to compat, and then you can keep working. But the long-term fix is to figure out either to turn everything to Unicode or to start using the proper APIs and pass the encoding that you need.
Yeah, exactly. This is -d file.encoding. This is the system parameter. And you can do in the Java 18 with compat is like it will behave like prior to Java 18. But what you could do, you could already in Java 17, let's say, point it to UTF-8, right? And then it will use internal UTF-8. So you could emulate somehow the Java 18 behavior, right?
Yeah, so exactly. So you can also do that in forward compatible manner. That's absolutely true. Exactly. And by the way, unlike to what one would think, file encoding does not interpret any other value than UTF-8 and compat. Those are like the only things it knows about. Which is weird, right? Because it feels like a property where you can just specify the default encoding, but you can't. What you can do in the past is you can force UTF-8, which is a great way to now test your app. Let's say you're on 8 or 11, or maybe even 17, and you want to make sure that it works on 18, then you can already force UTF-8 and then see whether it behaves or not, right? That's a great thing to do with with a test suite and just see whether everything works as expected.
By the way, I had already a trouble several times because I had a file and I had no idea in which encoding it is. And this is not that easy to find it out. So, and this is really interesting problem. So, my expectation was first, maybe the editor knows, but no, you could try and see whether it looks right. And then I did some research. It's not that easy actually to find it out. Interesting problem actually.
So it took me a long time to. It took me a long time to figure that out as well. Like the UTF occasionally used BOM, the byte order mark, and that actually tells can tell the reader or the editor that you use what encoding is used. But yes, usually that's not the case. It's just bytes, and you basically have to try different formats to figure out, does this look right? And so there, of course, is overlap, right? As long as you only use ASCII, you cannot differentiate some encodings. They look the same as long as you just use the ASCII part of their encodings. You will usually start to see differences when you use, like umlauts or, special characters. That's when you will start seeing the differences. And yeah, so it's not trivial. That is true.
Suggestion. So we will talk about Java 19 after your vacations. And Loom?
Yes. And Loom. Oh yeah, there will. Oh yeah, Loom, definitely.
We have to, because I really cannot wait for Loom. So this is I can, because right now I still see project try to experiment with reactive programming APIs without a reason. And I hope Loom will fix part of that, so that we get back to Java code like 1995, with simpler methods, and maybe as a cliffhanger, in most of my project I just write, simple Java code, and this is fast enough without any tricks. And of course, it is not. I'm not writing, load balancers most of the day, but with Project Loom, my expectation is we can be more scalable without lots of tricks, which is always good.
Yeah, so if the number of threads is the limiting factor for your app, and for many web backends that is actually the case, then Loom will probably change that a lot. It might only change it by a little, because you might find out just 10% more threads and now your database is the bottleneck. So this would actually be very interesting, because many projects will find bottlenecks are usually serious and you cannot identify the next one until you fixed one. So some might start using, hey, I use virtual threads now, I get 3 times the throughput, and others will be well, after 5% I figured that now, I don't know, now I'm CPU bottleneck, now a CPU is done.
And this is the reason why Oracle creates Loom, because then they will find out they will have to migrate to Oracle data.
Yeah, to more exact.
Okay, thank you. Where people can find you?
Yeah, so I'm NipaFX, NIPAFX, and yes, that is the FX from JavaFX, because I'm that creative. You can find me on Twitter, on GitHub, on Twitch, on YouTube. My website is nipafx.dev. But also importantly, I work for the Oracle Developer Relations team, and we do a bunch of stuff as well. So
and TikTok as well. Are you not on TikTok?
No. I'm not on TikTok. I'm too old. I tried to, but they kicked me out. They were like, what, you're above 25? Get out, you old man.
Okay. So I think you're now in Barbie suit to do something on TikTok or whatever. Right? No.
Maybe I am. I'm just not telling you. Whatever you do, don't look at NipaFX on TikTok. Right, so as I say, I work for the developer relations team, and we also do a bunch of stuff. So there's the official Java YouTube channel. So you can go to youtube.com/Java, where I do a newscast every other week. And then there's also dev.java and inside.java. So if you're interested in these kinds of conversations, if you're listening to Adam's podcast, you're most likely very on the cutting edge, then I can recommend looking at inside.java, and you will see a website that is basically an aggregator of all the small things that change. Not all the small things, the important parts of the small things that change, right? So you will find new JEPs were posted, interesting articles about maybe web server or about Loom, and also interesting mails on the mailing list will also get highlighted there. So this is all about being closer to how the JDK evolves. And it's a great resource. It has an RSS feed if you're old school. You can just get all your things to your home delivered and then check it out.
Old school is good, because if you have RSS feed, you have more vacations, because you can have everything in one place without lots of clicking. So
yeah,
enjoy your vacations.
Thank you.
Lots
I'll see you again.
No TikToks, no social media, and then, you are fresh back.
Yeah. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.